always believed that the feeling of being watched was just paranoia, a trick of the mind playing with shadows in the corner of my eye. But when I learned that 1 in 6 women and 1 in 17 men will experience stalking at some point in their lives, that unease grew into something far darker. This was no longer just an irrational fear. It was a horrifying possibility. And when it happened to me, it became my reality. It started subtly, with things that were easy to dismiss. A strange car parked at the end of my street, headlights off, engine humming softly in the night. A figure standing too close in the grocery store, just out of sight, lingering in the reflection of the glass doors as I left. It was easy to convince myself that these were coincidences, that I was just being paranoid. But the sense of dread grew, a low thrum in the back of my mind that refused to be silenced. I noticed that my mail was sometimes opened before I even touched it, and I would find small, almost imperceptible signs that someone had been in my house when I wasn't there. A window slightly ajar, a picture frame tilted just so. These were the moments that chilled me to my core, because they were designed to be noticed. Just enough to unsettle me, never enough to prove anything to anyone else. As the days passed, the signs became more brazen. I began to receive anonymous letters, each one more disturbing than the last. They were filled with intimate details of my life, things no one should have known, things I hadn't even shared with my closest friends. The handwriting was meticulous, almost obsessively neat, and the words were crafted with a sickening familiarity. Whoever was watching me knew everything. They knew what time I left for work, the route I took home, the songs I hummed absent-mindedly when I thought I was alone. They were always there, always watching, and they wanted me to know it. It was around this time that I met David. He was charming, intelligent, and handsome. Everything I thought I wanted in a partner. He appeared in my life at the perfect moment, just as I was feeling my most vulnerable. He made me feel safe, protected even, and quickly became a constant presence in my life. David was wealthy, successful, and incredibly attentive, almost to the point of being too good to be true. But I was lonely, and the comfort he offered was a balm to my frayed nerves. It wasn't long before we fell in love, or at least I thought I had. He seemed to know exactly how to calm my fears, always saying the right thing, always being there when I needed him. When he proposed, it felt like a dream come true, a way to finally escape the nightmare I had been living in. We moved into a grand villa on the outskirts of the city, a place far removed from the life I had known. It was a sprawling estate with high walls and iron gates, a fortress of solitude where I believed nothing could harm me. The fear that had haunted me for so long began to fade, replaced by a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. We had 2 beautiful children, and for a while, life was perfect. I convinced myself that the past was behind me, that the strange occurrences and the feeling of being watched had been nothing more than a series of unfortunate coincidences. David was a devoted husband and father, showering us with love and affection, always making sure we had everything we needed. We traveled, we laughed, we built a life together that seemed almost too perfect. But perfection is often a mask for something darker. I noticed things about David that unsettled me, little quirks that I had overlooked in the beginning. He was obsessively private, never allowing anyone into certain parts of the house, and he would often disappear for hours at a time without explanation. When I questioned him, he would brush it off with a smile, telling me not to worry, that he was just handling business matters. But the unease I had buried so deep began to resurface, gnawing at me in the quiet moments when I was alone. I tried to push it aside, to focus on the children, on our life together. But the nagging feeling that something was wrong refused to be silenced. One night, when David was away on one of his mysterious trips, I found myself wandering the halls of our home, unable to sleep. The house was eerily quiet, the only sound the soft creak of the floorboards beneath my feet. As I passed by a door I had never seen open, something compelled me to stop. It was one of the rooms David had always kept locked, one he had told me was just storage. But that night, the door was slightly ajar, a thin sliver of light spilling out into the hallway. My heart pounded in my chest as I reached out and pushed the door open. Before we continue to the thrilling part of the story, please leave a like so we can grow our channel. If you like the story, please leave a comment. Let's continue with the story. Inside, the room was unlike anything I had ever seen. It was a shrine, a grotesque homage to obsession. The walls were covered with photographs, hundreds, maybe thousands of them, of me. There were pictures of me as a child, as a teenager, from every stage of my life. Some I recognized, family photos, school pictures, but others were more recent. Ones I didn't even know had been taken. They were everywhere, documenting my every move, every moment of my life, from the mundane to the intimate. In the center of the room was a large desk, cluttered with notes and journals, all meticulously detailing my life in a handwriting that was painfully familiar. It was the same handwriting as the letters I had received years ago. A wave of nausea hit me as the realization sank in. David wasn't just a man who had appeared in my life by chance. He was my stalker, the one who had been haunting me for years. Everything, our meeting, our relationship, our life together, had been part of his plan. I was his obsession, and I had walked willingly into his trap. My mind raced as I tried to piece together the fragments of the truth, the sickening reality of what my life had become. I had married my stalker, had children with him, all the while believing that I had escaped the nightmare. But the nightmare had never ended. It had only changed shape. I grabbed the children, my hands trembling as I tried to stay calm, to keep them from sensing the terror that gripped me. We fled the house in the dead of night, the oppressive darkness of the villa pressing in around us. As we ran through the long hallway, I could feel his presence everywhere. The walls seemed to close in, the shadows deepening with each step. My heart pounded as we reached the front door, my fingers fumbling with the locks. The children clung to me, their small bodies trembling with fear, but I had to stay strong for them, had to get us out. Just as I yanked the door open, a cold voice echoed from the darkness behind us. "You can't leave me. You're mine. You've always been mine." My blood ran cold as I turned to see David standing at the end of the hallway, his face twisted with a sickening blend of rage and possessiveness. He started toward us, his steps slow and deliberate, as if savoring the terror in my eyes. "You'll never escape me," he hissed. "You and the children, you belong to me, forever." I didn't wait to see what he would do next. I pulled the children out the door, my mind racing, desperately trying to think of where we could go, how we could get away. The estate was vast, surrounded by thick woods, and I knew the gates were locked. But we couldn't stop. There was no time. As we bolted across the lawn, I heard him behind us, his footsteps pounding against the gravel as he gave chase. His voice was closer now, filled with a maniacal certainty that made my skin crawl. "You can't run from me. I'll find you. There's nowhere you can go where I won't follow." We reached the gate, and I fumbled with the keypad, trying to remember the code through the haze of panic clouding my mind. The children cried out, sensing the danger, as David closed in on us. The gate beeped and clicked, but it didn't open. I tried again, my hands shaking uncontrollably. Behind me, David's footsteps grew louder, closer. My heart sank as I realized he was almost upon us. And then I saw it, flashing blue and red lights cutting through the darkness. The police. They must have been patrolling the area, or maybe someone had called them. I didn't care how they had arrived. All that mattered was that they were here. I screamed for help, waving my arms frantically as the patrol cars sped toward us. David was only a few feet away now, his face contorted with fury. "No one can take you from me," he roared, lunging forward. But before he could reach us, the police car skidded to a stop, and officers burst out, guns drawn. "Stop right there," one of them shouted. But David didn't listen. He charged at us, a wild, desperate look in his eyes, and in that moment, I knew he was capable of anything. But the police were faster. 2 shots rang out, shattering the night, and David crumpled to the ground, clutching his leg, screaming in agony. The officers were on him in seconds, pinning him down, handcuffing him as he thrashed and howled like a wounded animal. It was over. The nightmare was finally over. As the officers led David away, his eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, I saw something flicker there. Something dark and twisted, a final unspoken promise that this wasn't the end for him. "You can't hide from me," he spat as they dragged him toward the car. "You'll never be free. I'll find you, wherever you go." But his words held no power anymore. The police uncovered the room, the photographs, the journals, every twisted detail of his obsession. His secrets were laid bare for all to see, and the man who had haunted me for so long was finally facing justice. The relief was overwhelming, but it was tempered by the knowledge of how close we had come to losing everything. As the sirens faded into the distance and the sun began to rise, I held my children close, feeling their warmth, their breath, their life. We were safe. We were free. But I knew that the scars of what we had endured would stay with us forever, a reminder of the darkness that can hide behind even the most charming facade. The nightmare was over, but the memories would linger, a constant reminder to never let our guard down again.